So, previously, we saw Makoto land in a whole new world thanks to some wild contract situation. He's got all these crazy powers now, but he's still adjusting to the weight of them. While he's out there, just trying to find a little bit of comfort and happiness, he meets Toa, a girl who happens to look just like his old junior in the previous world. This surprises him, and it even throws off his usual attitude. Mio, noticing the change, wonders if Toa might somehow be someone Makoto knew, but Tomoe reassures her it's impossible since she's seen his memories and he shouldn't know anybody here. Still, Mio feels a bit jealous, but Tomoe encourages her to get to know him better herself, which freaks Mio out. They all agree it's best to save Toa's sister quickly, so Makoto sends Tomoe and Mio to help while he and Toa head to the trading post. We get a flashback showing the tough spot Toa and her sister, Rinnon, are in. They got into debt trying to make it as adventurers. Rinnon had tried to pay it off alone, telling Toa to flee, but she got caught too. Toa is stuck and losing hope when Tomoe and Mio suddenly show up, and Mio uses her magic to heal her. Ready to leave, they find the door locked, but Mio just melts it away with her magic. But as they're leaving, a powerful adventurer named Mills Ace stops them. Turns out he's one of the top dogs in the area. Meanwhile, Makoto is pretty shocked when he sells some fruit from his world for a whopping 500 gold. Rinnon starts wondering about who he really is. They return to the inn, but Rinnon notices a guy nearby and rushes over. Makoto, using his abilities, spots her meeting with some adventurer who wants her to steal the fruit Makoto sold to help pay off their debt. She's torn, but eventually agrees, thinking of her sister. Back in the rescue scene, Mills Ace can't believe Toa is moving after everything, and we find out he's the boss of this group. Tomoe gets recognized with an insanely high level of over 1000, but Mills Ace and his men assume it's fake since it seems impossible. Mills Ace then offers them a spot in his group, promising them riches. Naturally, Tomoe and Mio refuse, so Mills Ace mocks them for following Makoto, who's supposedly only level 1. This fires them up and they go to attack, but Mills Ace blocks it with his barrier, which Toa realizes is the powerful Clay Aegis, leaving her worried that they may not stand a chance. On the other side, Rinnon's stuck in a tough spot, unsure if she should really go through with stealing from Makoto. Just as she's stressing over it, a receptionist tells her to scream, but then Makoto appears, calling her his friend. The receptionist remembers him and immediately apologizes, and Rinnon tears up, touched that Makoto sees her that way. Makoto's ready to stand by her side and protect her. Meanwhile, Mills Ace sends his guys to attack, but Tomoe smashes through the barrier like it's nothing, scattering his men everywhere. She's literally tossing them around like ragdolls, even hurling them through the walls of other cells. Mio jumps in too, using this as a chance to unleash some frustration on Mills, and they both end up wrecking the entire building. Toa's watching, half convinced she must be dreaming, but then Mills tries a sneak attack, grabbing her. Naturally, he just ends up getting launched into the distance. Tomoe wonders if they maybe went a little overboard, but Mio shrugs it off, saying those guys had it coming for bad-mouthing Makoto. The two of them start bickering over who did more damage, and Tomoe decides to show off, slicing through random parts of the town. Not to be outdone, Mio starts showing off too, and the destruction escalates as they continue trying to one-up each other. Back at the inn, Toa and Rinnon are finally reunited. Toa is so grateful and thanks Makoto and his team for saving her. Makoto notices that she looks just like his old friend, except for her hair. The girls are exhausted and quickly pass out, thinking the day ended well. But Makoto has other plans. He asks Mio for some silk and then, surprise, he ties both her and Tomoe up. Turns out he's a little less thrilled about the collateral damage they caused and decides to fling them away to give them time to reflect on their actions. After all the chaos and destruction, the gang heads out of town towards Silge, now joined by the other adventurers who'd also been captured by Mills. They stopped by a guild along the way and informed the receptionist that Zetsuaya was taken out by monsters. Luckily, Tomoe erased everyone's memories of the chaos, so no one remembers the madness, except, of course, for Toa and Rinnon. The receptionist at the guild asks if the monsters are still hanging around, and they assure her Mio and Tomoe took care of it, mentioning their levels are over 1,000. But she isn't buying it because no one's supposed to be that high level. Since news of their original registration in Zetsuaya never got out thanks to its destruction, they're told they'll need to register again. Makoto, a bit worried about the rivalry between Tomoe and Mio, realizes it could lead to more mayhem. So, he cleverly tells a tale about a samurai who journeyed to find true strength. Tomoe, totally inspired, decides she wants to train in the wild to level up even more and asks for Makoto's blessing to go on her solo journey. With Tomoe off on her training adventure, Mio's thrilled to have Makoto all to herself, but with Toa around, she's not quite the center of his attention. The gang keeps heading towards Silge when Makoto suddenly senses killer bees nearby with his kai. He tells Mio to handle it, and she slices them up with her wind blade, leaving everyone seriously impressed. They're ready to move on, but Toa insists on scavenging rare items from the bees' remains. Makoto's feeling awkward and a bit grossed out watching her dissect the bees' bodies, so he quickly loses interest and moves on. More monsters appear along the way, and Makoto decides to make things official by naming the group the Kuzunoha Trading Company. Things get intense when they run into rare monsters called the Ruby Eyes. Makoto asks Mio to handle them, but the adventurers beg her not to damage any valuable parts, which only frustrates her. She tells Makoto to handle it himself, so he grabs his bow, aims at the Ruby Eyes' weak point, and takes them down in no time. The group is blown away by his accuracy, but the excitement quickly shifts to collecting loot, and they manage to gather a solid 12 Ruby Eyes before they reach Silge. At the Silge Guild, Toa thanks Makoto for helping her level up during their journey, though he's a bit down, still stuck at level 1 despite fighting so many creatures. He spots an S-rank quest from a trading company looking for Ruby Eyes. Since they just collected a whole batch, he figures it's an easy score and takes the job. They split up the loot, with Makoto pocketing the Ruby Eyes and a few rare bits, letting the rest go to the team. Before they part ways, he suggests a celebratory meal and they exchange contacts on their fancy license cards. Because what better way to stay connected than adventurer cards that double as phones? During dinner, the group really hits it off, sharing laughs and learning more about each other. They introduce themselves: Louisa the gunner, Hazel the alchemy meister, and Renina the priest knight. Renina can't resist challenging Makoto to an arm wrestling match, but it's a quick defeat for her. Makoto wins without breaking a sweat. Toa then warns him about the quest they're heading into, sharing some spooky rumours about the Rembrandt Trading Company. Feeling a bit uneasy, Makoto decides to take a sneaky peek at the Ruby Eyes before heading to bed. Mio, rooming with Makoto, is daydreaming about some romantic moments together. In a bid to set the mood, she even thinks about wrecking one of the beds to make things more cozy. But, of course, Makoto has other plans, like falling straight to sleep without a care in the world. The next morning, Makoto discovers he can now create gates. The whole crew heads back to the demiplane, where he meets Tomoe's quirky clown and reunites with Emma, who's now his secretary. She fills him in on how all the different species are setting in nicely and working hard, plus they're building him a huge castle that looks just like the one from his memories. Talk about a major upgrade. Meanwhile, there's been radio silence from Tomoe since she left for her training, and Makoto finds himself wondering how she's doing. Just then, the dwarf chief rushes in, excited to show off their workshop. He presents a bunch of shiny new armor they've crafted, but Makoto gently explains that as an archer, he doesn't really need any armor. The dwarves look absolutely crushed and start tearing up. But then he spots a stylish coat that catches his eye. The dwarf behind the design warns that it'll absorb his mana and could be deadly. But Makoto decides to go for it anyway because why not? Surprisingly, he's perfectly fine in the coat. Beren explains it can change colours for defense or agility, but soon enough, it stops absorbing Makoto's mana and rips apart. When Makoto asks if they can make a sturdier version, Beren happily promises to craft one that might just be lethal, leaving Makoto a little nervous about that. On another note, the Aokis have magically turned into humans and are busy gathering ingredients, happily munching on even the most poisonous items without a second thought. The following day, Makoto takes the ruby eyes to the Rembrandt Trading Company, where he's greeted like a celebrity by the company's president, Patrick, and his butler, Morris. Meanwhile, an adventurer named Lime is lurking around the guild, eager to find out who snagged the job for the ruby eyes, and the receptionist is all too happy to spill the details about Makoto. Makoto meets with Patrick and, to explain his silence, claims he's under a curse that only lets him speak through magical bubbles. He casually mentions he's a level 1 E-class adventurer, which doesn't exactly impress Patrick, who assumes Makoto's just another newbie full of himself. But as soon as Makoto hands over the ruby eyes, Patrick is floored. He checks them out, realising they're the real deal, and quickly apologises for his earlier attitude. Curious, Makoto asks what the ruby eyes are for, and Patrick explains they're the key ingredient in a magical medicine called ambrosia that might cure his wife and daughter from a serious level A curse. Feeling sympathetic, Makoto mentions he knows an expert alchemist who could help. Patrick then admits he still needs a few more ruby eyes to make enough of the cure. Without hesitation, Makoto hands over all the ruby eyes he has, leaving Patrick and his staff thrilled beyond words. In return, Patrick officially gives Makoto his job receipt and wishes him luck on his registration exam at the Merchant Guild, which catches Makoto off guard since he didn't realise he'd need to take a test. When he arrives at the guild, the receptionist fills him in. The exam includes a written test, followed by a practical materials gathering challenge. She adds that failing means he'd have to wait 6 months to try again. To prepare, Makoto buys an expensive study guide, but immediately regrets it when he sees how dull the contents are. The receptionist notices his struggle and casually mentions that most people find the test nearly impossible. Undeterred, Makoto decides to take it right away, only to discover it's just basic math. He breezes through in 5 minutes, leaving the examiner shocked with his high score, while Makoto quietly wonders about this world's education standards. Next up is the practical exam, where Makoto must draw a random item to see what he'll need to gather. On to the next challenge. The examiner tries to make things tough, bragging that the item Makoto needs are extremely rare and giving him only 3 days to bring back something of equal value or greater. But Makoto, ever resourceful, remembers the valuable items he'd picked up on his last adventure. He takes them out casually, leaving the examiner completely speechless at his unexpected jackpot. Meanwhile, Tomoe is off showcasing her skills, defeating a massive crab monster and throwing a little feast for her crew. A demi-human messenger shows up with news that Mio has entered Makoto's memory vault, and Tomoe immediately feels a surge of jealousy. She rushes back and, after checking in, discovers that Mio isn't actually rummaging through Makoto's memories, she's just translating them. Tomoe tries to dig for gossip about anything that might have happened with Makoto in her absence, but Mio skillfully dodges the question. Later, Makoto finds himself struggling with the local language while trying to order at a restaurant. He ends up with a mysterious drink that's definitely not what he expected. His dreams of a decent meal vanish as he tries to choke it down, and meanwhile, Lime keeps an eye on him, blending into the background chatter about the recent monster battles. After his disappointing meal, Makoto returns to the demiplane to enjoy his favourite fruits, only to learn from Tomoe's clone that production's taken a hit due to bizarre weather patterns. While chatting, Makoto shares his ambitious idea of building an illusory city, a hidden place in the mist that travellers could only stumble upon by accident. There, they'd find rare foods and items which would make their value soar in the outside world. But his daydreaming is interrupted by a sudden telepathic call. Mio's in danger. He quickly checks in with a human Aoki, who explains Mio stumbled upon some anime memories in the vault and became an instant fan. Now she and Tomoe are in a heated debate over whether anime or historical dramas are superior. Makoto, playing the peacekeeper, lets them keep watching but firmly tells them to stop fighting about it. When night falls, Makoto's ready to hit the hay until he realises the room only has 2 beds for the 3 of them. He asks for one, but Tomoe and Mio playfully insist he picks one of them to share with. He opts out of the dilemma entirely and ends up spending the night in a chair instead. The next morning, Makoto teams up with Hazel to create medicine, while Lime and his gang lurk in the shadows, planning an ambush. Unaware, Makoto and Hazel head to the Rembrandt Trading Company, which makes Hazel a bit jittery given the company's reputation in the city. Morris escorts them to the lab where Hazel starts preparing the potion, only to be surprised by how straightforward the recipe is. However, extracting the ruby eyes fluid is a challenge, and Makoto can't help but cringe at all the praise from the goddess in Hazel's incantation. Getting fed up, he discreetly lends a hand to speed up the process. Hazel chats with Morris about why they're using ruby eyes instead of the rare ambrosia flowers, learning that since the bees eat the flowers, their eyes can serve as a substitute. Makoto immediately thinks it'd be genius to source these flowers himself. Hello, new business idea. They whip up a couple more potions, but just as they're finishing, Morris rushes back, dramatically slamming the door, which makes Hazel nearly drop the potion he's holding. Thankfully, Makoto catches it just in time, avoiding a very messy disaster. Morris leads Makoto and Hazel to Patrick, who's looking rough. When he tried giving his wife the ambrosia, she went wild, and it took several guards just to pull her off him. Patrick explains her spasm was like nothing they'd ever seen. But Hazel suspects there's more going on, likely a high-level curse meant to prevent her from taking the cure. Getting emotional, Patrick shares how his wife had only a mild fever at first, but it never went away, and eventually she lost her sanity. His hopes of ending the curse today seemed crushed, but Makoto steps up and offers to help. Though Patrick doubts him, Makoto's still supposedly level 1, Hazel vouches for his skills, mentioning Makoto's ruby eyes takedown. With both Hazel and Morris backing them, Patrick lets him try. Makoto uses Ambrosia's scent to draw Patrick's wife out and then holds her in place, thanks to some slick judo moves he learned from his sister. With her steady, Patrick gives her the ambrosia, and to his relief, she finally starts to recover. They also cure his daughters, and Patrick is overcome with gratitude, even thanking the goddess, which doesn't sit well with Makoto. Leaving Hazel behind to refine the cure, Makoto heads out and finds Mio and Tomoe waiting for him, but their reunion is interrupted by an ambush. While Makoto dodges, Tomoe and Mio stay put, letting the attackers strike so they can test their strength, which, unsurprisingly, isn't much. Lime, the leader, attempts to bribe Tomoe and Mio to join him, but Mio, curious, asks how much he's offering. When Lime says 10 gold, she casually agrees, promoting a frustrated glare from Tomoe. But Mio's just playing along, remembering how they went overboard back in Zetsuaya and wanting to keep things in check for Makoto. With Tomoe's nod, Makoto lets her handle the attackers and she makes quick work of them. Lime begs for mercy, and Tomoe agrees to spare him after peeking into his memories. Lime confesses to casting a curse on Patrick's family, though he's shocked to learn it was fatal. He'd been told it was only a sleeping curse. Turns out, a mysterious man had convinced Lime that putting Patrick's family into a harmless slumber would make Patrick rethink his business practices. To make sure he's telling the truth, Tomoe reads his memories and confirms that Lime isn't lying, so they decide to let him go. But just before he leaves, Mio can't resist grabbing his gold for herself, saying she deserves it for sitting out the fight. A few days later, Lime formally apologizes to Patrick. Though Patrick accepts his apology, he warns Lime that he'll be limited in his future as an adventurer. Lime surprises him though by saying he's ready to leave that life behind anyway. And that wraps up this part. So, what do you think? Could Makoto finally be carving out his place in this wild new world? If you're as hooked as we are, don't forget to catch the next part because, trust me, Makoto's journey is just getting started and there's no telling what's coming his way next. So stay tuned and until then, see you later.